Welcome to the big show.
He could go all the way.
Welcome to the dugout. Do we have a show for you today? We have none other than STU WEINSTEIN from the old days. Now this is going to be an interesting part of the program, and the reason Stu is on here is a lot of you guys out there in softball land may not remember this guy, but I sure do, because you can't tell the story of Florida softball history without the name of STU WEINSTEIN. And that Stu is, went on from softball and became the head of security at the Miami Dolphins. So we're going to talk a lot about that too, and we're going to talk about a lot of great work he's doing in charity. So I hadn't seen Stu in 40 years. It's a great reunion for me, if he remembers me.
Oh no, definitely. I definitely remember you.
Okay, Dano, tell us about Stu.
I think he's the world's greatest photo bomber. You can't see a picture of Don Shula, Jimmy Johnson, any Dolphin coach without seeing Stu. It's pretty cool, actually. Stu, absolute honor to have him here. Knowledgeable person inside the Miami Dolphins organization from '85 to 2018. For 34 years, Stu was a director of security for the Miami Dolphins. He also worked in the same capacity for the NFL. Stu has given a lot back to his community, and in retirement, he's also Dolphins alumni, volunteer, and ambassador, helping many cool charities, as Ed mentioned. The man that was always on the clock and no time for hobbies. Welcome to the dugout, Stu. We're so grateful to have you here.
No, thank you for having me come up here. It's an honor.
Well, we had a bunch of guys that you know, Fleetwood, Masenko, and my mic just went out, and you messing with it.
No, move your thing.
All right, move on. I'm good? You were messing with it now.
No, just move that. If that moves, move the bottom link.
Okay.
I hear you.
On the job training, but I lost.
Yeah, it's gonna, if it does that, do this. That's what it is.
Oh, that right there? Okay, it's only about the 8th show, so I should have that.
That's just happened.
Okay, here's what we're gonna try to do, Stu. Like I said, you can't talk about Florida softball without you, buddy. And you were a dynamic personality, is the way I remember, and a good player also. I was just a rum-dum little startup player with the Bull Gator. I'm surprised you remember Bull Gator.
Oh yeah, no. Well, actually, one of the reasons I remember him was we played you guys up in Savannah. I'm assuming you were with the team.
I was with them.
This was 1970, and I'd taken a pickup team. It was the first time I actually managed a team. I took a pickup team up there. You could do that back then. Yeah. And we were loaded. I thought we were gonna, run through the tournament and end up playing Jerry's in the finals. And we played a team from Rock Hill, South Carolina, on an open field, and they beat us.
Because you had the home run hitters.
Well, they're hitting long fly balls, and they're just long outs. And we came back in the losers bracket. We ended up winning 6, 7, 8 games in the losers bracket. We beat you all late Saturday afternoon. You guys hit a couple home runs. Rod Luce played for you.
Rod Luce. And
he banged a couple out. But we ended up, it was a fairly low scoring game, 9-5 or something. And then we played you again in St. Petersburg at the end of the year. But this time you reversed it. You guys put a good ass whipping on us.
What was the name of the team at that time?
You were still the South Brevard Merchants.
No, but you guys.
Oh, we were. Oh gosh, we went over. Let's see. We went up to Savannah's Big Daddies, and we went to St. Petersburg as Big Daddies. And then the following year, I ended up. That's when Jerry Pendergrass agreed to sponsor us up in Fort Lauderdale. So we had Jerry's in Miami and Jerry's in Fort Lauderdale. And Doyle Croft, who was one of Jerry's top guys, he had gone up to Melbourne, was working in the Melbourne kitchen, and he got on the sponsored bull and your team up in Melbourne.
Yeah, Doyle became one of my best friends over the course of his lifetime there, and it started with the Jerry's team. That guy could throw a ball from right field to home plate.
Not only throw a ball, he was, when he played in Miami, and again, they didn't really have a lot of parks with fences back then, and they used a wooden bat. And again, hitting long fly balls really didn't get you anywhere. You had to be able to hit line drives, and Doyle was outstanding ball player,
Base
great
hit,
outfielder, got base hits. He actually had, there were 4 Croft brothers. He actually had 3 brothers that all played softball. One of them was a catcher at Hialeah High, and his claim to fame was he was a catcher when Richard and Charlie Huff were pitching for Hialeah. Of course, Charlie Huff went on to have a great major league career.
Well, I'm glad you brought Doyle up because I'm sure his son would enjoy this discussion with
Well,
his father.
Again, he earned it. He was a darn good softball player, and like I said, good guy, really a good guy.
Amazing to me, the guys that you remember guys, you talk about Rob Luce and, let's talk a little about the guys back in the day. You started playing softball in 1966?
Well, what happened was, I played on a Sunday league, and then I played 2 nights a week. But these were leagues like, if you hit a fly ball to right field, the right fielder was gonna miss it, and you're gonna get a home run. They weren't real good leagues. The first time I really played competitively was 1969. I was at Florida Atlantic in my final year, and a team had picked me up, a local team called Foldomatic. And we ended up having a decent year. We came in 5th Memorial Day in Fort Lauderdale, and then we upset a couple teams and came in 5th up in Cocoa. Unfortunately,
4th of July
Fourth
tournament.
of July.
That was the big tournament.
That was the big tournament.
How many teams?
Back then, that year there was 40.
Oh,
But a couple of years later, and Ed can verify, a couple of years later, Cocoa expanded to 64 teams.
Yeah, it was the big
If you
tournament.
got-
If there was a big tournament, that was one of them, and the big one in Tennessee they called
Chattanooga, Pick-a-Dixie. Yeah,
Pick-a-Dixie.
Pick-a-Dixie.
Now they try to duplicate that in the senior world, but it's really big with the number of teams. But, let's go back to your recollection of the 4th of July.
Well, I'll tell you the difference between 1969 and 1970. 1969, they used wooden bats. We came in 5th. We were 3-2, and I led our team. I hit 2 home runs, but they were the home runs where I hit them between the outfielders, and by the time they got the ball, I'd gone around the bases. Obviously, I'm a little more mobile back then, and then I hit 1 that hit the top of the fence and flopped over. So I had 3. Fleetwood won the home run trophy that year with 5.
Wow.
That was 1969. A year later, they used the wooden bats, and there must have been, Fleetwood was one of them, there must have been, I wasn't one of them, but there must have been 15 guys that hit like double-digit home runs.
Wooden bats or aluminum
This
bats?
is aluminum, the first year of the aluminum bats.
The first year of aluminum bats, yeah, because I remember that, because I think Logia Lounge was the
They
first.
came in second.
team, and
Chuck
they were the
Pete.
first team to use the
Right, Chuck Pete was the
phenomenal player.
MVP. He was 37 for 42 in 11 games. And I
Unbelievable.
mean, you'd have a hard time back then. Now I know since have gone on where you've been 37 for 42, but back then, you couldn't put 9 guys in the field and throw the ball up and hit it and go 37 for 42. It was unbelievable.
Absolutely true. Chuck Pete was like a tremendous, I don't know whatever happened to the guy, because I never seen
He
him.
ended up, he lived in West Palm. He got divorced. He moved up to Canada. Why, I don't know. I would see him. He was a big Chicago Bears fan. And anytime the Dolphins would play the Bears up there, he would show up. I'd see him at the game. Yeah.
Well, let me stop you on Canada, because I don't know if we told you this or not, but my buddy here, Dano, he moved from Canada. He's a
Okay.
Canadian who moved here.
Well, you and Chuck switched.
I'm happy that Chuck allowed
Well,
me to switch.
Danny's pretty good, but I'm not sure he's a Chuck Pete, but maybe he could be one.
Yeah.
But Chuck Pete, wow. Let's talk about some of the players. You got Fleetwood.
Fleetwood, H.T. Waller. We talked about Rod Luce. And then, a funny story, one of the good friend of yours and one of the best players, especially hitters, was Bruce Meade.
Bruce Meade, yeah.
Bruce Meade started off playing with the Manatee County All-Stars in 1973. And I remember the first time I saw him, I thought the guy was Mr. America. He's, 6'6", 220.
He still looks like Mr. America
he
at
had
55.
a 30-inch waist,
Yeah.
this handlebar mustache, and anyway, but he was feast or famine. He'd get a hold of one. He played in an open field tournament in Boca that year with the Manatee County All-Stars, and he hit one that might have gone as far as Delray. He might have hit it out of Boca, but he also would pop up to the catcher. I mean, he was just. But a couple of years later, now he's with Kofor Brothers, and he kind of came into his own. They qualified for the Nationals, and he hit a couple home runs up there. Warren picked him up. The next year, he was part of arguably the best one-season team ever. For 1 year,
Warren
they were
Brothers.
96-2,
96.
and their first four were Mike Nye, who's obviously a Hall of Famer,
Yes.
Ronnie Ford, who's a Hall of Famer, Fleetwood, who just got in the Hall of Fame, and Bruce. That was our first four hitters. And I don't know how many times they did this, but I'd be willing to bet a lot of money they started off most of their games 4-0.
Because unlimited home runs back in the day.
Well, and you know, the final game, they ended up playing a team out of Seymour, Indiana. The Nationals were in Jacksonville that year, and they ended up playing a team from Seymour, Indiana, the final game, and they won the toss. Darrell Leaf was a manager, and he said, "We'll bat first." By the time the Indiana team came in the bat, they were down 20-something-0. Fleetwood had hit 3 home runs in the first inning.
Oh my gosh.
It was
Marty, you are a
unbelievable.
wealth of knowledge, man, a wealth of knowledge. Darrell Leak, that's a character. I got to meet him in my senior year.
Oh, I'm sure.
And you know, we had similar personalities. We used to go back and forth
he
with
was-
one another.
He was a riot.
It's a lot of an act, but it's just like me.
Yeah. He was a riot. He actually, I mean, he was a
Good player. He's solid player.
He made All-World 1 year.
Great player. He's a great player.
The first year they qualified for the Nationals, I think it was in Michigan, and they went up there, and Darrell made second team All-World. Now again, when I say guys made All-World, and I'm going to talk about a couple of guys that played for me that I think should be in the Hall of Fame, but we didn't get to enough national tournaments where they could show what they could do. But Jim Washington and Jim Underhill, every time we got to the Nationals, they starred. But we didn't, as you know, it was tough down here getting to the Nationals. You had to get through a state, and then you had to get through a regional, and it was tough. And where some of the regions around the country, once you paid your entry fee, you were in. I mean, Howard's, they're a great team, but they didn't have a lot of competition there. And obviously once they got to the Nationals, they won a couple of them. But it was tough down here.
They probably bought their way into at least the regional, because
Sure.
that was the whole game.
Sure.
Get your regional, and then you have to
Exactly.
2 tournaments.
Exactly. And again, I mean, these two guys, to me, I'm not saying that they were any better than guys that are in the Hall of Fame, but they certainly should qualify. And you know, a couple of guys I was
I
fortunate
know
with.
both of those guys well because they played with them.
Of course, yeah.
Jim Washington is like a phenom.
Well, he was also a Vietnam War hero, and he's presently struggling to.
Oh, is
He got Agent Orange.
Do you guys number?
I'll give it to you before I go.
We do that.
He's in the VA hospital right now.
Really, I need to
fighting
call
for his
him
life,
because
yeah.
we traveled a lot together. He played in my 40s team,
Yeah.
and I'll tell you a funny story. It's short, but we were rooming together, and the hotel clerk knocks on the door, and he says, "Sir, you can't have a dog in your room." I said, "I don't have a dog. It's a guy sleeping. He's snoring." That was Jim.
No, I was a couple other guys I was blessed to coach. Curtis Williams, the first time he played,
Great
first
player.
time he played big time softball was with us with Jerry's, and he's in the Hall of Fame. Greg Furman, also that was his first year in big time softball. I think he's in the Hall of Fame. And then later I coached a Class A team, and Dave Reed was our pitcher. We went to Memphis for the Nationals. We finished 5th, and Dave's in the Hall of Fame.
You know,
So,
Dave and I are like brothers.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But there's a guy, I'm going to go back just a minute to the 4th of July, because you had a guy, and we were playing you guys in the 4th of July. I'm not sure you were the coach, but you must have been at that time. Big right, a left fielder, huge guy.
Jim Merton?
Collins?
Oh, Sonny Poe?
Sonny Poe.
Oh, yeah.
Sonny Poe. We got in an argument like I know.
Well-
he told me he'd get on my knees and kick my ass, and I said I'll go out and get my gun. I didn't have a gun.
Ed. I'll tell you 2 stories about Sonny Poe. Well, first of all, if you would have squared off with him, he would have backed down. That's not. Hopefully, he's not listening to this, but if he is, he is.
Yeah.
But
Hey, don't worry.
when we went to Memphis, when Dave made first team All World. We lost our first game, and we won 2 more, and then we were playing Sunday. We were playing a team out of Louisiana. In the 3rd inning, we were down 13-2, and they were getting ready to bat. So it looked like we were done. I mean, it looked like this is going to be the last game we play. Sonny wanted out. He didn't want to play. He was mad because someone had thrown a bat and it nicked the tape on his bat. So I took him out, and I put a guy named Jimmy Williams. We get him out in the third inning. In the top of the fourth inning, Jimmy leads off, hits a home run. We bat around. Jimmy hits another home run. Now we're up 14-13.
Sonny wants to come back in.
Well, they had that rule you could
You can
re-enter.
re-enter.
I said, no, I'm not taking the guy out. The guy hits 2 home runs. Are you kidding? So he grabs his wife and makes a loud announcement that he's got a choice. He's either going to leave or kick my ass.
Oh.
So I went over to him and I said, Sonny, first of all, you can't kick my ass. Second of all, you're better off just leaving. So he did. He ended up leaving. We won that game and 2 more, and we ended up finishing 5th.
He just left. That's crazy, man, these guys. Where are we at now? We're talking about...
Well, you're talking about Coco? Again,
yeah, Coco,
we were blessed. We finally, I went up there many years, and we finally, 1980 we won it, 1981 we won it, which, again, that was, like you said, a very prestigious tournament. And by the time, but to be fair, when we won it, they didn't have the 40 teams anymore. What they did is they broke it into 2 divisions. They had an A Open division, then they had a B division. Of course, we played in the A.
That's where I wanted to break it. Yeah, I had that thought, then I lost it. But when did it? You see, we were talking about how difficult it was to get to World Championship. Big air, Larry.
Again, nice meeting you guys.
It was difficult, but then USSSA came and said, "Hey, we got this great idea. We're going to make qualifying tournaments all year," and that's how they went through. Were you still in the game?
I was, but I was always ASA.
Well,
we never switched. No, I was the USSSA commissioner in 1981. The guy Don Ramsey, I think.
Don Ramsey was the head of it.
Well, he flew me up to Virginia, and yeah, he had heard about me and asked me. He said, "Would you be interested in helping us get the USSSA going?" And I wasn't a big ASA fan anyway.
So you connected with Charlie LaRoche.
Oh yeah, watch. I did it in '81, and then I gave it to Charlie the next year.
Yeah, because I was district director for 25 years.
Yeah.
You know? That's right. No, I forgot all about that.
But that's the way to go. Look, we again, I'm not just saying this because it was my team, but we went up to Stark in 1971 for the state tournament, and these were the 6 teams, and one team moves on, not 2. One team moves on. It was Joe's House of Pizza, who had twice been the runner-ups in the country. Smith's Plumbing, who later came in 5th in the country. They were headed up by Frank Sorrells and Bill Tolbert, a heck of a team. The local team, Garden Restaurant, later became the Green Machine with Kenny Carlton and Marcus Roden and Jim Garlington. They finished 5th in the country. Later, we were Jerry's of Lauderdale. We merged with Jerry's of Miami. We finished, during my watch, we finished 2nd and 4th, 2 different years. The Longhorn, who never made it to the Nationals, but they were 3-time state champions. And the 6th team was, a decent team, Mobley Realty. And out of that, 1 team got to move on to the regional. When you got to the regional, you had 2 teams from Alabama, Southern Fastener and Clutch. You had Warren Motors. We talked about Dick Landers's team, which was always a good team. So that's what you're competing with. And now in Jerry's of Miami. So, I mean, it was tough. And again, like I said, some of these regions, the first time I went to the Nationals, which was 1974, some of the teams that were playing at it, they would have come in 6th in your Melbourne City League. I mean, they just, again, that's just the way it was.
No, yeah, I think it was I don't want to say it was harder to get there for sure.
Sure.
And everybody played with everybody. I mean,
right.
The way they tried to do it, and I guess this is the way our society goes. Everybody's got to be some kind of a winner.
Yeah.
Which is all right because softball now has so many levels. You can be a winner at all levels.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. I'm not trying to blow smoke up your end, but when you got in that seniors division, I used to read about you. Dave Reed it was unbelievable. I mean, you were out hitting me. You were out hitting Don Clatterbaugh, who was a star leadoff hitter for Dave Carroll's team.
Well, I can stop hitting. I don't know if I ever out hit Don or Dave. Dave and I used to go back and back. And one year I beat him. I hit 801. He hit 800. What I do claim is that I backed up all guys that used to be my idols.
Oh yeah, Bruce Meade.
Bruce Meade and I are like lifelong buddies.
Yeah.
And Dave Reed and I are. Dave at one time used to back me up. But now, what do you do when you're a parent and you live through?
Your kids vicariously?
Vicariously. Yeah. So I lived through Dave vicariously because I got him into being I can't say to be the best home run hitter, but it did make him to the next level. But he's such a hard worker.
Oh, yeah.
And discipline.
Yeah.
You know, his weights in it, but the overlap grip was the key. I don't know how many guys used the overlap grip that you remember.
None. Nobody.
Yeah. And I was one of the first guys to
Really?
do it on it. Yeah. Johnny Godbolt. Do you remember that name?
No, I didn't
John Godbolt was a WWA guy who was as good a home run hitter as anybody.
Wow.
And I played against him, and then we became teammates, and he showed me the overlap grip, and that's where I took it from.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, another guy I got to talk about that every time we played against him, he was 5 for 5 with 3 or 4 home runs. Craig Elliott, the rest of the peace. He unfortunately passed away, but he was. And then this is a guy. I don't think he ever lifted a weight in his life. He was just a big old country kid from somewhere up in South Alabama, and Wadley, Alabama.
Wadley.
And I mean, he would come up. I didn't care who was batting behind him. If there was an opportunity to walk him, we'd walk him. We weren't going to pitch to him.
You sent me a note. You mentioned a guy I had totally forgotten about. He was one of the greatest third basemen there was.
Bill Dawkins.
Bill Dawkins.
He's from here. He's from
here. Yeah, we played together a long time.
Yeah, well, the reason I remember him is my high school football coach, who was a buddy of Angela Dundee. I was talking to Larry about him. His name was Bill Dawkins too.
Was it?
But Bill Dawkins, 1969, I got picked up by a team to go to Jensen Beach. This is when Jensen Beach was first starting softball, and we finished second, and you know, we're waiting for our trophies. Back then you get first and second place trophies, and they're talking about the MVP, and I thought it was Bill Dawkins. He had played for Drive-In TV from Melbourne, and he not only fielded like Brooks Robinson, but he in the final game, the if game, he hit the winning home run. I was pitching off of me to win the tournament, and they gave me the MVP award.
They gave you?
And I almost didn't want to go on. I was embarrassed to go on and get it because this guy had such a phenomenal tournament. So what I did is it was a real nice plaque. So I went over to him and I said, "Look, man," I said, "this is really yours." He wouldn't take it.
That's a lot of class, buddy.
Yeah,
That's a
well,
lot of class.
I was, like I said, I was embarrassed. I probably batted like 450. I think I hit 2 home runs. He batted like 680 with like 8 home runs, including the home run that won the tournament.
Yeah,
And
I got to jump in with a story about that because it's very similar. It makes you and I being similar cats, because we were in a tournament and I was playing against my buddy Dave. He was playing on the lower. I forget the situation, but we're in the middle of the state playing the ISA World, and we're supposed to win. I had all the studs, but Dave pitched against us. He had a great tournament pitching against us.
Yeah.
And with the team is announced, and their coach, Bill Trenzel, Jim Trenzel.
I didn't know him.
Yeah. Well, he got on the all-world team, and there's no mention of Dave Reed. I flipped out. I'm on the other team. I said, dude, I went up to the tournament director and said, you need to put Dave Reed on that damn all-tournament team. You got this coach that never played. He put himself on there, and we got him on there.
Well, that sounds like what happened in 1977. And Bruce Meader remembered the story. Nelson Paints got in the losers bracket, as did we with Jerry's, and we ended up meeting in the semifinals, and they drubbed us. They beat us 30-14. Then they went on. They beat Howard's, and they beat Ken Sanders twice, and they won the Nationals. One of their outfielders was a guy named Joe Young.
Joe Young,
Great ball player. Now, he was a little...
the mighty Joe Young.
The mighty Joe Young.
Yeah, I know Joe.
He was a little on the feisty side.
Yes.
And if my wife wasn't sitting here, I'd use some other adjectives to describe him.
He liked to drink.
He liked to drink. But he should have been the MVP of the tournament. They gave it to... they had a co-MVPs, Bruce and Craig Elliott, who both had phenomenal tournaments. But Joe got some key hits, made a couple great plays in the outfield. But he drove his car into the park. But Parma didn't have a lot of park. I don't know if you ever played up there.
No,
they didn't have a lot of parking. And he pulled in, and he was late. Nelson was on the field getting ready to play. So Joe had a Cadillac. He jumped out of the car, and there was a security guy in the parking lot. He threw the keys to the guy and said, "Hey man, do me a favor, park my car. I need to go play." And the guy goes, "I'm not parking your car. And if you leave it here, it's going to get towed."
Yeah.
So Joe said, No. If you're not going to park it, don't tow it." They start going face to face. Joe hits the guy.
Oh no.
The guy goes down. Joe jumps the fence. They start playing. So when the game was over, they called the police, and the police came over. Well, no. Nelson paid some money to the guy he hit, but they kept him off the. He not only wasn't the MVP, they kept him off the 2 all tournament team, which was ludicrous.
Yeah, I guess that's payback. But Joe was he was what they call a rounder.
Or you guys are a little bit too young to remember this, but there was a movie that came out in the 50s with James Dean. It was called Rebel Without a Cause.
Oh yeah, I'm not too young.
That was Joe. Joe was a rebel without a cause.
Talking about young, you know, I asked Dan, what was his name? Oh, we're talking about Bert Smith. I said,
Oh,
you know
great.
Bert Smith? Or,
Yeah. Well, he was supposed to play with us in '77, but he went to the Pro League.
But let me tell you what Dan said. He said, no. I said, you did? I said, how old were you in the 60s? He
1
said,
year old.
1 year old.
Oh.
I said, that explains
No,
it.
Bert was a 3-time MVP, and you know the Bert Smith O.J. Simpson story, right?
No.
Oh, this is great. And again, if I'm talking too
No,
much about
no,
stories,
keep on. No, good.
Um,
We got about another 10 minutes before
all right.
we get into football.
Cleveland hosted the '75 Nationals, and Jerry's didn't make it. Kofor made it. Kofor went up, and Stewart National Bank went up.
Now, I remember them boys.
Well, it had a lot of rain that year, and
Yeah.
they backed everything up. So Richie Moore, a dear friend of mine,
Richie Moore.
passed away.
He passed?
Yeah, he
When?
I guess last year. Yeah, he passed away last year.
Yeah.
They get on an elevator. Pretty much all the teams are staying in a couple of the hotels, and they get on an elevator. Well, the Bills are in town to play the Browns in a preseason game. And this is when O.J. Simpson was at his zenith.
Mhm.
So the elevator starts going up, opens the door. A couple of the Howard's players gets on the elevator, Bert Smith being one of them. And Bert Smith looks over and sees O.J. Simpson. Hey, O.J. Simpson, how you doing, man? How you doing? Shake hands. Bert Smith, 3-time MVP with Howard's Furniture. O.J. Simpson doesn't know what he's talking about. They're riding up, and Bert's giving them his stats. You know, lifetime 690 hitter. Unbelievable.
Oh,
So you're saying OJ was not impressed?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously he did some pretty bad things later, but at that point he wasn't really impressed.
That's crazy, man. Yeah, we all have our own little fishbowl, but yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, I get so ingrained in the stories, you know. Let's talk about what are some really interesting stories you remember from the old days?
Softball
Yeah,
stories?
softball right now.
Well, besides the ones I've already talked about,
Yeah.
you know, I was blessed when Jerry sponsored us. What happened with me with Jerry's was I was working as a private investigator, and I had cases to work. A lot of them were NFL cases because I was an NFL security rep, and I just couldn't leave Thursday and come back Monday, and that's what Jerry started doing. He started flying the team up Thursday night, and they'd be off Friday, and then they start playing Friday night, and if they made it to the finals, which we usually were in until Sunday, sometimes we wouldn't get back to them. I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it because of my job. So at the end of the season, we finished 4th in the national. I told them, I said, I just can't, and I'm not going to, I can't come up Saturday. I can't run the team if I'm not there. So I kind of dropped down and started coaching Class A, which was more what we used to be with Jerry. We leave Friday and come back Sunday. And that's when I was blessed. Collins Irrigation sponsored us, and then the next year, Ride Motors sponsored us. But I mean, again, just having that, without the sponsors, you don't have anything. I mean, you're not going to be able to travel, and obviously our travel went from flying with Jerry's to driving, but we were pretty much a regional. We're pretty much like regionally played instead of traveling all over the country, and it was still sitting around the pool at night reflecting. And it was just a lot of fun. And again, some of the guys I played with we're still friendly to this day. I mean, we still talk to this day or text to this day.
It's a great bond between softball players.
Definitely a great bond. And then when I started working for the Dolphins, if we went to a town where like when we go out and play Jacksonville, sometimes guys from the Green Machine would come up to see me, or some of the guys from Warren Motors would come over to the hotel to see me. So, we kind of kept the bond, going.
Well, let's do this because you just segued into where we want to go anyhow. It was in 85?
85.
85 is when you switched. Okay, I'm done softball.
Okay.
And I'm going to be full-time Miami
Yeah,
Dolphins?
I'd worked for League Security, was one of our clients I was there from 73 to 84. The guy I worked with, Eddie Du Bois, he actually started in 68 with the NFL, and he worked up till a couple of years ago. 49 years he worked for the NFL. But anyway, after Super Bowl 19, about a month after, I got a call from Coach Shula, and he said, I'd like to talk to you about something. So I went over to training camp, and he said, we really like what you did the week of the Super Bowl with kind of coordinating our security, and would you be interested in working with us? And I said, yeah. I said, first of all, I didn't have any benefits working as a private investigator, and these, this was a full benefit thing. So I said, yeah, I'd be
Great job.
I'd be honored,
Yeah.
And he said, well, let me talk to Joe Robbie. I had a meeting with Joe Robbie. I lowballed what I was looking for money-wise, because Coach Shula said, if you don't, you're not going to get the job. And that started my career with the Dolphins. And interestingly enough, I actually coached 3 games with the Dolphins. I put together a softball team. The first one, Steels was on the roll. I don't know if you were playing with them then, but they were on the roll, and they were coming through to play somebody, and we played them at FIU at a baseball stadium. I put together a Dolphin team. They beat us by a run, and then that was 1986, and then 1994. Dan Marino approached me and said, look, he said, I met this guy, Michael Bolton. I didn't know he was talking about it. Never heard of the guy.
Great singer, Michael Bolton, right?
I'm 50s and
Renee?
60s. I'm thinking of the Drifters and Crystals. And so I said, anyway, he said when he comes to a venue to play for a concert, he has a softball team. So I'm thinking there are a bunch of band guys. I said, yeah, I'll put a team together. So we put a Dolphin team together.
Did Meade show up?
No, he wasn't there, but Mike Boland did.
Mike Boland
But
did?
Dave Carroll did.
Meade played with him.
They had 2 or 3 guys that I remembered from yesterday year, and we played them in a baseball stadium, and they're taking batting practice, and they're hitting them out of the stadium. I mean, not a 300-foot fence, out of the stadium. So I'm thinking, and the place is packed. We saw whatever Yankee Stadium held was there. And I'm thinking, where the spring training in Fort Lauderdale.
Okay.
So I'm thinking, this is going to be embarrassing. We're going to get our asses kicked. But I also noticed that they only used 2 bats, and we had a couple bats. So I went over to their manager. I forgot his name, and I said, look, and Bolton played. Bolton played, and I think the guitar player might have played. I said, look, man. I said, is there any chance we can borrow your bats? And the guy said, no, we can't. We can't share our bats. So I went back to our dugout. We were the home team. They opened up with a 5-6 run top of the first inning, a couple out of the park. Bolin hit one, and besides being a great softball player and a great football player, the guy you did not want to mess with on our team was Brian Cox. So I said, Brian, look, man, and Brian was up third. He was batting third. I said, look, they got a couple bats over there. How about grabbing one for us? So Brian walked over to the dugout, and the manager was standing there, and Brian said, we'll be using this bat. And what's the guy going to say? So we ended up beating them by a run.
Oh, that's cool.
But I mean, those bats.
Leave it to STU WEINSTEIN to come up with the answer.
Those bats and the balls they were, it was unbelievable. I mean, and this was 1994. Then the next year, the Heat challenged us to a game. I'd forgotten about this when I sent my resume in, and we beat them. We ended up beating them. So I was 2-1.
Well, Daniel, why don't you take it into the football world since you're the expert on this team?
Well, it's you're full of cool stories for sure. But when you started with the Dolphins, did they know what they wanted you to do? Did you show up and have a job description?
I had no idea. At that point, there were 4 teams that had in-house security: the Cowboys, the Packers, the Oilers, which are now the Titans, and the Browns. So I called the 4 guys. I knew them from NFL security. I called the 4 guys and I said, why don't you give me an idea of what y'all do?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing I knew they were all weak on was checking out prospective draftable players. This is before free agency, so it was just a draft. So I kind of honed in on that. And I was doing anywhere from 300 to 600 background checks a year. And again, I
Did you do that all by yourself?
No, I have a company that I work with, But the interviews I did by myself. And then sometimes I would have an off-duty police officer. I had a group, I called them the Leos, and they would come with me to the All-Star games and the combine, and I'd split them up with them. So, you know, that, we covered that. And then, of course, any player issue, if a player got in trouble with the law, we would, I was, you know, that was in my wheelhouse. It seemed like this time of the year, when nothing's going on, is when the player would usually get arrested. So Renee and I'd be on vacation up at Disney with our family, and I'd have to either come back early or call, and, you know, that was something we did. And then, you know, travel, I would take these Leos with us to travel to make sure. What I was finding out was players sometimes were breaking curfew. We didn't have anybody on the player's floor, so I started bringing the Leos, and that was their responsibility, was to sit on the player floor and make sure that the players stayed in the room once we did our bed check. The thing that I got involved in that I really enjoyed the most and still do was the you know, working in the community. You know, I grew up in South Florida, and yeah, I mean, you know, quite frankly, you know, STU WEINSTEIN showing up at the American Cancer Society event, you know, who cares? But with the Dolphins, you know, with the Dolphin name and bringing players, it's really been a blessing for me. And my wife, she likes to volunteer. We volunteer now. I volunteer with the alumni, Dolphin alumni, Catch 81, which is O.J. McDuffie's foundation, the Jason Taylor Foundation. Twan Russell has a reading foundation. We both volunteer at an entity called Sheridan House, and then we volunteer at our church, City Rev Church. So, you know, that keeps me busy. And that was one of my biggest concerns about retiring. I'd gone through 7 rounds of chemotherapy for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which, again, I've been blessed it hasn't come back. But you know, I don't play golf. I'm not playing softball anymore because I have a hard time getting around, and I don't fish. So I was looking for something to do. So this volunteering became the gospel for me.
Fulfills you and then fills so many others that you're helping.
Well, again, and you know, again, if you can help somebody out, you know, why not?
Yeah. When it comes to the players, like I kind of had the impression, not the impression, or the idea that, you know, Stu would be a bad guy to the players, but in doing my homework, you were really endeared to your players. How did you do that?
Again, the 4 guys that I talked to that were working for the 4 teams that had in-house security, that was my first question with them. I said, I don't want to be perceived as the jailer. I mean, I want them to trust. So they said, here's what you need to do. If a player comes to you with something that's not going to affect the brand of the team. Now, obviously, if he gets a DUI, if he gets caught beating up a female or getting in a fight, you can't. I mean, you got to do what you got to do. Mm-hmm. But if it's something you can help them with, don't go running upstairs to tell Don Shula or Jimmy Johnson, and they'll come to trust you. Mm. And that's what I've been able to do. The guy that's taken my place, he's been there now, I guess, let's see, he started in 2016, my last couple of years, so he's been there 7 years now. He learned from me, and that's what he does. Again, if it's something you can help the guy out with, it's not gonna, you know.
Did you train him?
Oh yeah, he worked with me for 12 years as a Leo. And yeah, his name is Drew Brooks. He was a retired Pembroke Pines detective, and that's what you got to do. Cause if you don't have the players' trust, you're not gonna get anywhere. Mm-hmm. And as a matter of fact, players would come to me with other players' problems that may affect the team, and I was able a lot of times to get in front of them. Now, let me say this to be fair: Drew's job now is a lot harder than mine. We didn't have social media back then.
That was one of my questions.
A lot of the times. I could get something resolved and nobody ever knew about it except the people in our building. Now, forget it. I mean, you know, but again, social media has changed everything.
Yeah. Did you, I also read that you had to go into some scary places sometimes.
One of the scariest times I ever had, we had a player, first-year player, whose mom was a crack addict. And he had brought her down here trying to get her to get off drugs, and his first game as a Dolphin, when the game was over, we have like a players parking lot. I was out in the parking lot. Coach Shula had left. Players pretty much were leaving. He was one of the last ones out, and he said, "How about taking a ride with me?" I said, "Okay, you know, we're done." I mean, the game was over, and we go up to this part of Fort Lauderdale, which you don't want to be caught in. and it turned out his mom had a relapse. I don't know how he even found out about it, and he had to go in and get her. And I'm sitting out in the car.
So you didn't know?
Oh no, until we got there. He told me when we got there.
Oh,
What I thought he was taking me out for dinner.
Yeah.
Until we made a couple turns up in Fort Lauderdale, and this wasn't a place you wanted to have dinner.
Right.
And I'm sitting in the car, and I'm thinking, oh my God, and he brought his mom out, and so yeah, I mean, and then another night, this was before this, back before we had cell phones, I get a call, and it's two of our players, and they were in a bar in a bad area in Miami, and they said they're in there, and the guy's got a gun, and they didn't want to call the police, and can I get over there? And I didn't live too far from this particular bar, so I get over there thinking again, this isn't a good place to be. It's 2-3 o'clock in the morning. But when I walked in, they were in there laughing. It was a joke. They were playing a joke on me. There was no gun with a gun.
Did you ever get into a situation like where you had to, like where you got fought or shot?
I'm not real proud of this story, but a week before my 50th birthday, we were we were getting ready to play the Dallas Cowboys. This is Jimmy Johnson's first year, and we were staying in a hotel out in Bonaventure, and the hotel had 9 buildings, and we would be assigned one of the buildings. That was so this was building 5. That was our building. So I'm getting ready to do bed check with our trainer, and we look, and there's this guy, pretty good sized guy. He was, probably about 6'2", 300 pounds, and he's walking up the stairs with a female, and they each got drinks in their hand. So I said, hey man, I think y'all are in the wrong building. This is the Dolphins building. Well, first words out of his mouth is F you, I'm a Dolphin, don't bother. Yeah. So I'm looking at the trainer, and I said, look man, by the way, there was a police officer there. We had a cop, but he was around the corner. He wasn't right there. But one thing lead to another, and players are it was getting loud, and players are starting to come out of the room, so I can't back down. And he hands his drink to his friend, the female, and said, hold this, honey, I'll be kicking this guy's ass.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking,
no.
and I again, growing up, I grew up in a Miami Gardens, I've been in some fights. But I'm thinking, if I get my ass kicked in front of half the team, this is really going to be, well, fortunately I didn't. I was able to subdue the guy, and it turned out the cop came, had him in handcuffs. They're going to arrest him, and then the hotel showed up, and they had screwed up, and they had mistakenly put him in our building. So he wasn't lying. He wasn't a Dolphin, but he was in. So we made a deal with the guy that we wouldn't arrest him if he would get a room in a different part of the hotel.
Let me say one thing here, but if I remember my memory, you were a pretty big guy back then.
I was about 270 then, but
that's what I remember.
But I was also
this guy was a small guy.
Well, no. This guy was probably 22, 23 years old. Like I said, I turned 50. That was the end of October 1996. I turned 50 a week later. So I wasn't really looking. I lifted weights, and I worked out.
He's 270 pounds. He was a damn mountain man.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, this guy was 3+.
Right, Renee?
So that's the last time I actually had any kind of a. Now I had a couple where it looked like it would get like that, but I, usually was able to either talk the guy down, or again, I had these Leos with me, and they would, yeah.
The bonds that you develop with the head coaches, how did you do that?
Well, again, trust. I mean, it wasn't just with me. It wasn't just about doing strictly security. If they needed, one coach was a Dunkin' Donut fiend, coffee fiend. Tony Sperano, rest in peace. Unfortunately, he passed away. So a couple times a week, I'd go to Dunkin' Donut and bring back coffee. I mean, I'd get involved with their families. Renee would get involved with their families. Excuse me. And again, it was more like a family than it was a job.
Mm-hmm. Did you find that the coaches were different in what they
Oh,
wanted and what
they
they
were
expected?
Each coach, I could sit here from now until you guys get tired of doing podcasts. Each coach was different.
Really?
I mean, totally different. Even Jimmy Johnson to Dave Weinstein, who were buddies, they were best friends.
Yeah.
They were different.
Everybody has their own way.
Yeah, they have their own way, exactly.
Let me just bring up one thing. We talk about trust. Trust is the foundation of all human relationships.
No
And
question
that's
about
what
it.
it's
No,
said with-
no question about it.
Was there, because you were on the inside, if there's, from an outsider's point of view, or maybe before you even met some of these guys, is there something that you found that was quite different from what you expected of the person?
Well, again, had I not coached softball for the number of years I did, I don't think I could have made it with the Dolphins.
Really?
I mean, I think dealing with, I mean, you know, Bruce Meade, I will give you an example. Craig Elliott. I mean, these two of the greatest softball players, Jim Washington. I mean, they're not making millions of dollars like these football players,
Sure.
but they've got egos. I mean, they're the
Yeah.
best. They're the best at what they do.
Yes, they are.
And I wanted to be the best at what I did. So I learned from my years in softball how to manage people. Now, sometimes it didn't work out. I talked about this guy, Sonny Poe, who's going to, kick my ass in the national tournament.
He was threatening a lot of people
But
back
I
in the
mean,
day.
yeah, but the point is, I mean, that helped me work with these players. Another thing I found out, and of course, again, I didn't know this growing up. I mean, I grew up in a totally white neighborhood. My first dealing with someone of color, I was 19 years old, and I played on a semi-pro football team. I say semi-pro, we didn't get paid. So an amateur football team, and there were four players in the team that were from Hallandale, and they were men of color. That's the first time I ever had any dealings with anybody. So I kind of learned as I went along. And in softball, I mean, I mentioned Washington and Joe Young, Al White, but I mean, there weren't a lot of men of color playing softball either. But what I learned is a lot of these players grow up, either they didn't have mom and dad at home. Sometimes they didn't have either one at home. I mentioned the one player who had mom who was a crack addict and had him when she was 14. So I had to understand, and you can never say, these people that say, they'll tell someone, I know where you're coming from. I didn't know where they were coming from because I didn't grow up like that.
Sure.
But you had to understand that, and that's why I started the program with the Leos, with the cops, because a lot of the young men had run-ins with cops that weren't pleasant, and they had this picture of cops all being assholes. So I started bringing cops in to work with us off duty to show these guys, and some of the cops still have relationships with these players.
That's pretty cool.
That's a brilliant move right there.
That's smart.
Yeah.
I also read that you used to jog with Coach Shula.
I jogged with Coach Shula, jogged with Jimmy Johnson, I jogged with Dave Wanstead, I walked with Tony Sperano.
Why he only walked?
Well, we jogged initially, but he had some stomach issues, and he had to quit jogging and just start walking.
Like flying on the wall stuff. Like, what did you guys talk about?
Whatever they wanted to, sometimes.
Did they talk about football?
Well, I was around football for a lot of years, but the level I played at, I was a high school football player that didn't have enough ability to move anywhere else. I played this 1 year as an amateur football player, again, with no scholarships lingering. And so my knowledge of football isn't really knowledgeable. So no, I mean, they might vent on something that happened. Coach Shula would do that maybe the week before. Something that happened during the game, he might, but it was a one-sided conversation.
Stu, most of my friends love football, and they would like die for this, to live your life almost as far as that goes. Like, was there a moment for you, because you were a fan too? Like, you said to yourself, like, "Wow, is this really happening?"
I say this: the disappointment in my life is I've really only hit one home run, and she's sitting right over there. But
That's
smooth,
he's
Stu,
referring
that's
to
good.
his wife.
But
now.
I was blessed every day for 34 years, and before that for 11 years, and now for 5 years with the work I've done with the Dolphins and the National Football League. My regret is we never won anything, and I could mirror that with my softball career. I coached some great softball players. I was around some great softball teams, but unlike Ed, when the dust cleared, we were never the national, world, whatever you want to call it, champions. And that's my only regret.
But let me put something in here, because I get that, it was my drive, I wanted to win a world on, but this is about Stu Weinstein here now. Stu, I didn't even know you that well, but I felt like I did. You were a dynamic person. Your personality, you left a mark on softball.
Yeah.
You didn't have to win it. You know so much about the game. Guys talk about you that I know, remember you back in the day. Dude, you don't need that national championship to be a guy that had influence in our game.
I appreciate it, and again, I felt I was the best in softball, and I felt I was the best as a security director with the Dolphins. But again, we'll have these events. This last year we had they honored the undefeated team. Mm-hmm. They had them come in for a game, and then they went on a cruise, and I helped facilitate that as a volunteer. And again, it's just still envious of when you see someone and they show you the ring and it says we won it all. There's a program that's on ESPN. I watch it sometimes. I ride an exercise bike, and Bill Parcells is one of the voiceovers, and he says, and this was after I think he won his first Super Bowl. He said to his team, he said, they can never tell you that you couldn't get it, you couldn't do it. Mm. And that's what I wanted to be able to say at the end of it. And like I said, we had some great team. My first year, we were in the AFC Championship game at home against the New England Patriots, who we had beaten a couple weeks before. And if we won that game, we're going to play the Chicago Bears, who we had beaten a month before. Mm. So I'm thinking, my God, this is my first year, and I think the Super Bowl was in California that year, or New Orleans, one of the two. And I'm thinking, first year I'm going to get a Super Bowl ring, and of course, New England pounded us. And then fast forward to '92, now we're playing the Buffalo Bills at home, and we had split during the season. And if we beat them, we're going to play the Cowboys. But again, I'm thinking, we've beaten the Bills. Why can't we beat them again? And they ended up beating us. That's the farthest I got, was the AFC Championship game twice.
Yeah.
What about Mercury Morris? Mercury's been in my living room, signed a book for me, and spent about an hour and a half with that guy. You need to give me his number.
I'll give you that before I go. He is as articulate. I mean, again, he got caught up in a situation where he was a druggie. Yeah. And he was not Tony Montana from Scarface. I mean, he was looking to score drugs, to use drugs, and he got hooked on pain pills, and a heck of a football player. I mean, again, the Dolphins hadn't won anything until they started using him more, mm-hmm. and I don't think he has it anymore. But for a lot of years, he had yards per carry. He was the top guy, 5 point whatever yards per carry. Great football player, yeah. And I'll tell you a funny story about him in a minute. But the judge realized he had gotten screwed. And they got him out long before he was supposed to get out. And he's gone on to be a motivational speaker and really has given back to the community. But a funny story about him, his senior year, he went to North Texas, which was a small school. And he and O.J. Simpson were considered the two favorites to win the Heisman Trophy in 1969. They met each other at a couple of functions, and seemed to get along pretty well. Mercury Morris, another guy, I know what he's done and all that, but he's very articulate. He's one of these guys that he meets you one time, he never forgets your name or never forgets something about you. And I'll tell you a story about that in a minute. But anyway, so O.J. Simpson wins the Heisman Trophy. He sends Mercury a signed picture and says, "Merc, sorry about the Heisman Trophy, but the better man won." And that stuck in Merck's craw. And if you look at the games where they would play each other, the Dolphins and the Bills,
he did better.
I think one time OJ beat him, and the Dolphins beat him like 30-0, and they just kept handing the ball to OJ. But every time they played, Mercury outplayed OJ.
That's cool.
Yeah, and a good story about OJ. I met him at a Super Bowl party I was working in 1979. For the league. I was working security, and so that's 79. So 13 years later, he comes down for Coach Shula's celebrity golf, tennis, fishing tournament. I pick him up at the airport, gets in the car, and I stick my hand out, said, how you doing? My name is, I know you are, you're Stu Weinstein. I'm thinking, how in God's name did he know who I? And again, you couldn't Google back then. This is before all that.
Sure.
And he said, yeah, you've been with the Dolphins now. He had my whole story, except for softball. I mean, he didn't know anything about that. But he's just one of those guys that just could kind of take all that in and would remember it.
Yeah. Interesting.
He gave it, let's not get into that.
Yeah. Well, I got some quick one answer, short answer, a bunch of short questions. Who's the most generous player?
With his time? Oh gosh, I'd have to name 10 or 20. I mean, starting with Dwight Stevenson. Dwight Stevenson tore his knee up in a game, Monday night game, and basically ended his career. And the following Saturday, he made a commitment to do a community service. I thought he was going to cancel. I was going to go with him. He went and did it.
Wow.
I mean, again, Dwight Stevenson, Troy Vincent, who's now the number 2 or 3 guy in the league.
Yeah.
The Pouncey brothers, Mike and Marquise Pouncey, O.J. McDuffie, Larry Little. He just had a street named after him. Dan Marino's had a street named after him.
Let's stop you at Dan Marino. Tell me about Dan Marino. What kind of personality is that?
He's the kind of guy you want to go have a beer with. I mean, he's got a good kind of an easygoing personality. Obviously, was a tremendous competitor and one of the greatest players in NFL history. Another guy that donates his time. I mentioned Larry Little, Nat Moore. I mean, Nat Moore, since he's retired, he heads up the alumni, and he's out doing something every single day in the community. And again, Mark Duper, excuse me, John Offerdahl, Bob Brzezinski. I mean, these guys, I could probably put together guys that don't contribute easier than guys that do. I mean, again, and the thing about our situation, which is much different than most, especially like a place like Green Bay, is most of our guys have stayed here.
Yeah.
They don't leave.
Why would you?
You're in like paradise.
Yeah, why would no state tax.
Yeah.
And the thing the guys find out is and I'll tell you a John Offerdahl story. Excuse me. The thing that you find out is it pays off for you. Now John Offerdahl started a bagel business, Offerdahl's Bagels. He had one shop on Sheridan Street. We got a call from our owner, Wayne Heisinger. This is around kind of like a little bit earlier than now, maybe early July. And he calls me and says, hey, is Dan in town? I said, I can find out for you. I said, what do you need? He said, well, they're having a dinner. It's the National Association of Christians and Jews. And they're having it at the Broward Convention Center, and they're looking for a speaker. And I said, well, Dan will do it for you, but that's not really his deal. I said, we got another guy that it is his deal. It was John Offerdahl. And so I talked to John. It was supposed to be John, his wife Lynn, and me. This is before I met Renee. And I was going to drive him there. Usually if I took someone somewhere to an event like Coach Shula, whoever, I would drive him, but I wasn't always participating in the event. I would wait for him. And so I drive John. His wife couldn't go. She'd gotten sick. So we get there, and John says, man, how about doing me a favor? How about sitting with me? I said, no. I said, you're going to be at the league table. They're not going to want. Fortunately, I wasn't dressed like this. I had long pants on, and a collared shirt. I did have a collared shirt. So I kind of reluctantly, said, okay. So we go to the league table. Dave Thomas is sitting there from Wendy's.
Wow.
They started a friendship, and it was about like you and Dave Reed. I mean, they became best buddies. How many did John end up with? 14? 14 Offerdahl bagels from hanging around. So it pays off. I mean, it pays off for you.
He
mentored him. He mentored him. Mm-hmm. Another guy named Eddie Houck. He had a big wings place in Fort Lauderdale.
Eddie
Hauck''. Eddie Houck. He actually mentored Kim Bocamper, who's got a bunch of restaurants, and Bob Brzezinski, who's got a bunch of restaurants. So from getting out there in the community, you make some good contacts, and we
that wasn't Hooters, was it?
No, that was Dan. That was Dan's guys. That was That was
The guy from Tampa.
Regnier, Champ Regnier, and Dave somebody. The two guys, the Hooters guys, were actually Fort Myers. They were based out of Fort Myers,
Fort Myers.
and that was Dan's guys.
No.
But again, you know, it pays off. I mean, Nat Moore, we have this thing every year called the Dolphin Cycling Challenge, and it's to raise money for cancer. And I've worked it every year up until this year. This year I decided, I asked them, I said, can I ride an exercise bike? Because I can't ride a regular bike. And they said, yeah. So I ended up signing up for it. Well, you raise money, you hit people up, and they sponsor you. And you know, Nat, I think OJ was second. I think OJ raised $8,000. I actually finished third. I was somewhere around $5,000 or $6,000. Nat raised like $20-something thousand from all the good things he does in the community. So, like I said, it's kind of a win-win. Coach Shula's the one that really got me going with that because he was so active in the community. And I just, you know, again, I just kind of picked it up from him and, you know, sailed with it.
Football's full of good people.
Yeah.
Sometimes tough people. Let's say Stu got into a dicey situation. You had to call one player.
I mentioned Brian Cox. My second call, if Brian didn't answer, would be Tim Bowens.
Yeah.
Yeah, those guys. I'd go into any situation with either one of those guys. I mean, there's others.
Yeah.
But I definitely would roll with those guys.
Who's the most impressive athlete?
Mark Clayton.
Mark Clayton.
5'8", could dunk a basketball. He actually on a bet in college in Louisville, leapfrogged a ping pong table. Think about that.
Oh, wow.
Think about that. I mean, this is about half the size of a ping pong table, and he
Standing. Didn't go run into it.
No, he ran.
Yeah, okay.
But I don't care. You know.
Wow.
And I understand that they're all great athletes. I mean, you don't get.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
You don't get to that level and not be a great athlete.
Yeah. Do you have the best memory? One that stands out other than what you've already shared?
Best memory?
Yeah.
Was getting married to her.
That's cool.
What did he say, getting married?
Getting married to Renee. See, I met Renee. Renee and I both went to Maimi, Norland. She was 4 years behind me. I knew her older brother, and she well, can I tell the Phil story?
No.
This is no.
No, about the batting average.
Oh, that's too long.
No, the batting average.
I know, I said it's just a long story.
Anyway, I knew her boyfriend in high school, and she'd gotten married. She married a guy named Joe Mosier, and they were married for 25 years. He unfortunately died of cancer. So, and I had swung and missed a couple times on marriages and kind of given up. So we had a hotel we used to stay at called the Renaissance. I'm sorry, Rolling Hill. That where they shot the movie Caddyshack. I don't know if you remember the movie.
No, I remember that movie.
Anyway, so Monday night, the lady that was in charge of the hotel manager was trying to get their bar business going. So she asked me if I could get players to come over. Our training camp was right down the street. So she was asking if I could, you know, get some players to come over. I said, sure, as long as you feed them and, you know, let them drink. So one of those nights, Renee was there and we hooked up. And that was in October of '98 or November of '98.
Fate.
Did you guys do any games in London or Mexico?
I traveled. Let's see. I did a game in London, a preseason game with Coach Shula in 1988. We played the 49ers. Then we went to Tokyo in preseason and played the Raiders. When I say played, we scrimmaged them during the week and then played them. '92, we went to Berlin with the Broncos. And then fast forward with Jimmy, we went to Mexico. We didn't scrimmage them, we just went and played. We played the Broncos. And then nothing with Dave, nothing with Nick. With Cam Cameron, we went for a regular season game in London and lost to the Giants, who ended up winning the Super Bowl that year. And then went back 2 more times to London. And each time we go on these trips, I would have to do an advance. I'd go like an advance. Oh, with Coach Verano, we went to Canada and played the Bills up there. And so I've been overseas, you know.
Was it a challenge as a security guy?
Yes, no. The biggest challenge was Japan because of the language barrier.
Right.
You had to kind of work through an interpreter. I mean, they took good care of us there. But my biggest concern, of course, was especially when we would go for multiple days, was some player was going to get jammed up, and we'd have to rely on the embassy to let the player get unjammed because.
Did that ever happen?
No, thank God. I mean, Japan, we had a briefing in Japan, and the guy with the U.S. ambassador's office told us. He said, I just came from a hearing. 2 college girls were over here, and they got caught with cocaine. Again, we're not talking Tony Montana here. They had cocaine they were using. 20 years they got it. Their parents came over. They were pretty well-to-do, and they were offering everything and anything. 20 years. And I said, will you do me a favor? This was on a planning trip. I said, when our players come over, we're going to have a briefing, the whole organization. I want you to tell that story.
Yeah.
Let me just break in 1 second. I just want to check with Dan. Do you know who Tony Montana is, Dan?
No, I don't.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You better tell him who Tony
Oh, I'm
Montana
sorry.
is.
Al Pacino played a movie called Scarface.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Oh,
Tony
that's
Montana.
right.
Yeah. Not to be confused with Joe Montana.
Yeah, I remember in 1960. Yeah,
But anyway, no, thank God we never had. And then when we went to Mexico with Jimmy, the briefing there, they told us, and we were only there for a couple of days, but they said don't go anywhere that you're not in a group because they'll get kidnapped, and again you got to get them back, and thank God that didn't happen.
Yeah, I know. You better think twice. You
Well,
try to kidnap a
now,
couple football players.
again, all of these games were before, not all of them, but a lot of them were before 9/11. Now this year the Dolphins are going to play the Chiefs, and they're going the end of October, and it's on one hand it's a break because playing in Kansas City, those fans are right on top of you. You can barely hear yourself think, so you're getting a break there. You're not having to go to their home venue. But to be in Germany for a week now, I'm glad I'm not the security guy.
Yeah. When you look back at your career, is there anything that you would do differently?
My life or my career? If you're talking about my life, I had an incident in October 31st, 1960, where when the week ended, I was suspended from school and got put in youth hall for the weekend. I certainly would have done that. Oh, and I lost part of my tooth. I certainly would have done that different. But no, as far as my career, I mean, again, I think I gave it a fair shake. I mean, I certainly did in softball. I mean, I wanted to be the best I could be, or my team be the best it could be. And the same with the Dolphins. I mean, I walked in there every day wanting to make the Dolphins the best. So not really. I mean, yeah, I probably made some mistakes. I'm not saying I was perfect for 34 years, but I don't think I'd do anything different.
That's cool. That's cool.
Well, I guess the proof is in the pudding, as they say, my friend. And in softball, you got a lot of good friends, and from what you're telling us, you're pretty tight with a lot of them football players.
Yeah, I've stayed, like I say, I've been blessed. I've stayed in contact with, and what I do is I have a monthly text I send to all the alumni, just telling them I'm here for you and love you and all that. If you need anything, I'm here 24/7, and I get the responses, and I've had a couple of them that at first I wasn't getting responses from, and then all of a sudden they started responding. So.
Well, like Dan Marino, the people that you know and come in contact with, like you don't have to win the championship to be a champion, Stu. Like
No,
you're a champion.
and Dan certainly. I mean, again, he unfortunately only got the one Super Bowl, and we, he played well, but we didn't win the game. But that was my last function with NFL security. I went with the Dolphins the next year. But no, you're right.
Yeah.
And Nat Moore. I mean, all the work he's done in the community. He was on 2 Super Bowl teams, but lost them both. But again, you're right. You don't have to be you don't have to win it all. But again, I'd like to, even without the ring, I just like to have been able to have said, in 19 whatever we won the Super Bowl, or in 19 whatever we won the ASA National Championship.
Yeah.
I can tell you a funny story. Everybody dreams of winning a Super Bowl. Kenny Stabler was in Vegas. He had a Super Bowl ring on. I said, Kenny, can I put that ring on? He let me, right? I took a picture,
Wow.
and I I lost the camera on the way home from Vegas.
Oh,
Oh, man.
well, how about this? I work, Jason Taylor has a function every year. He honors somebody in the community, and what? Oh, and my role there is go with a couple of the Leos, and we make sure we watch. He puts his ring on a table, and people can go by and
Oh, really?
put it on his Hall of Fame ring.
Yeah,
But we make sure that they don't
cops
walk.
are standing right there.
We make sure that they don't walk
Yeah.
away with the ring.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, everybody has that.
And again, he had a Hall of Fame, first ballot Hall of Famer. Zach Thomas, we're actually going up in a couple weeks. Excuse me. Zach Thomas is getting inducted, and neither
Oh, you
one of
going
them.
to all?
Yeah, we're going up for that. Yeah.
Well, that's
And neither one of them won a Super Bowl, but again, they're still both obviously champions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're a success, dude. You've been around successful people. To share with our audience, what would be the 3 keys to success that you've learned?
Well, the first thing is a belief in God. I mean, without God, nothing's possible. The second thing is you obviously have to have ability with whatever you're doing. I mean, if you're a general manager, you have to know personnel. If you're a doctor, you have to know medicine. If you're a lawyer, you have to know the law. And I think the third thing is just your work ethic. They say your character is who you are when nobody's watching you. And I think that's what you gotta do. I mean, again, he's a great example of that. He played softball at a fairly high level, and then all of a sudden he became a superstar. Well, it wasn't just because.
I like talking to you. I'm no superstar, but thanks.
No, I mean, and it wasn't just because he had ability. He went out and he worked his rear end off every day. We talk about this Dave Reed. I mean, when Dave Reed came to play for me, Dave was from Minnesota, and he had played on a couple good teams up there, and he was a decent player. But he came with me and had a great year with me, and then again he got in the Masters division and again became a superstar.
Now let me talk about Dave just for a second since you brought it up. Now him and Clatterball actually became the Bruce Meade, if you will, of senior home run hitters.
Wow.
I mean, both of those two guys.
Wow.
And actually at one point, now Clatterball is the ultimate. He's going to be on right after you, by the way.
Oh wow!
We
Okay.
got Clatterball on right after you. He's going to be on the phone. But he is truly, I mean, he's the one guy, Marty, and maybe you can help me with this. I don't know any other player that was at the top of his game when he was young. And in the middle, I'll call the middle 35 to 40 to 50. And a lot of guys drop off. A lot of the big time guys drop off at 50 and they're not in it anymore. And at 50, now he's still going at my age.
Wow.
Him and I, and I don't know if you knew this, but when we turned 50, him and I combined. I mean,
Wow.
we came together and I had the opportunity, and he's became a really
Well,
good one.
the first time I noticed him was 1977. He was a leadoff hitter for Dave Carroll's team, and the thing that was kind of unique about him was he could lead the game off with a home run. Usually your leadoff hitter was a guy like Mike Nye or Chuck Pete we talked about, and then get on. And then the number 2 guy would be a guy like Fleetwood or Ronnie Ford that would hit the home run. But Clatterball could do it all. I mean, he could hit the home run or get up there and get a base hit. After that is when I dropped down to the A, so I didn't really see him play too much after that. But no, you're right. I mean, he another guy that I don't really know this guy, but he was played out of Orlando. His name was Dwayne Royal.
That's my buddy, Dwayne.
Well,
we played together for.
he
He was the nucleus of my team from 35 to.
Yeah, well,
50.
he played with Adair,
Yes.
and I don't even remember him. I mean, he was, again, I'm sure
He grew at 35.
and the first year they had, excuse me, first year they had a 35 and over, it was an invitational, and it was in North Miami.
North Miami. Okay.
So
No
came-
fences.
No, that was a fence. They had
Well,
fences.
one of the fields that we
Yeah,
played.
no. So
Sam Pansula.
well, a local team came to me and said, "Would you want to play with us?" And I said, "Yeah." Well, I didn't turn 35 until November, so I was too young. Oh, thank you. I was 34 and 9/10. So then they said, "How about running the tournament?" So I did. I ended up running the tournament, and you mentioned Pansula. he came down with Lawson's Auto Parts, or is that what it was?
That's
Lawson's Auto
Lawson Automotive.
Parts. And they had P.J. Williams, who's a good friend of mine, Larry Hingle,
There.
Sam Bender, Max Reed,
Sam Bennett.
and they came down. They got beat early, and they came through the losers bracket. They were run ruling everybody, and they ended up winning the tournament. And that's when it was a USSSA. That's the year I was a commissioner, and that's when it kind of got sanctioned.
And when you said that, I remember Sam being, Sam Pansula,
Yeah.
obviously was.
Is he still? Hopefully,
No, I
he's
ain't
still
seen-
alive.
I don't know if he's still
Oh.
alive. I haven't seen him in years.
I know his
ever.
wife Stephanie passed away.
Yeah.
I don't know. A lot of those Longhorn guys have gone.
Yeah, there's not.
Bobby
I don't
Collins.
even know where. I don't even know where Rod Luce is. I mean, he lives in this town. I ain't seen him in years.
He kind of got out early. He was in real estate, and I think he preferred making money than going to Titusville and hitting home runs. Rod Luce.
Right. Well, insurance.
Insurance. I'm
Because
sorry.
he
You're
sold
right.
me a policy
You're
I
right.
kept for like 30
But
years.
speaking of insurance, did you know a guy named Ronnie Smith? He was a State Farm agent. We were college buddies. I kind of lost track of him. I was just wondering.
No.
Another guy that passed away was Leroy Berry. He passed away.
When did he pass away?
It's been 6-7 years. He was a superintendent for Clark County
well,
Schools.
around here.
Yeah.
And him and I are tied. I knew him. He was a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
A fairly good friend. We played together a little. But I should have been on the Longhorns. I'm diverting here a little bit. It's kind of like, a mistake I made when I was young. Dick Landers wanted me to come and play with Canaveral Seafood.
Yeah.
And I said, no, I'm going to stay with my buddies. And then when he got hooked up with Canaveral, I wanted to come. He said, nah, you didn't come with me then.
Right.
So
Well, they merged one year. One year the
They
Longhorns,
did.
they were the
and that's
Canaveral
when,
Longhorns.
yeah.
Dick and Marty Clark ran the team.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if Marty's still alive either.
I'm not either, but I think he is.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Johnny Prine, he passed away early.
Let
Henry
me-
Scott passed away.
Let me tell you a story about Johnny Prime. I get a call from Rick Shotwell. Remember that?
Yeah, sure.
Rick Shotwell,
Yeah.
good friend of mine. He was the
Played for
HR guy.
Canaveral. Yeah.
HR guy at Harris, and he comes back. I said, Rick, I tried to call you last. Yeah, I was at Johnny Prime's funeral.
Yeah.
I said, Johnny Prime's funeral? He said, yeah. I said, what did he die from? He said he had skin cancer.
Yeah.
I said, skin cancer, what's that? He had this mark on his back, and he didn't get it looked at.
That's right.
And then he went to the doctor, and they said, well, you got stage 4 melanoma. I said, what did that look like? He said it was a little brown thing, and it just kept growing. I said, really? I got one on my leg. And I hung up the phone. I went to the nurse, and I said, what's this on my leg? I thought it was strawberry, because back then I slid a lot. She said, no, I don't think it's anything. I'm going to send you to the skin doctor now. I said, okay. So I went to the skin doctor. He looked at it. He said, I don't think it's anything. I'll do a biopsy. 3 days later, I'm back in that doctor's office. Says, sir, you have melanoma.
Oh my God.
And we got to send you to another doctor. And I went to the doctor, and they said, but then they sent me to see if it was behind my eyes. So long story short, I had melanoma. I had it operated on.
Wow.
I had level 2. Johnny Prime saved my life. That's why I had to bring a story.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Now, again, I mean, those guys, Bobby Cox. I mean, those guys they were all solid guys. And Henry Scott became.
Henry Scott, that was the other guy.
He became a
He
golfer.
was a Dolphin, wasn't he? Wasn't he a Dolphin?
He
back
tried
in the
out. He didn't make the team. He tried out in 1969. He didn't make the team.
day? And I say Henry Scott. What is the one thing you remember about Henry Scott that no one liked?
He didn't hustle.
There you go, buddy. He didn't hustle. That's the manager right there.
He did not hustle.
He did not hustle. Man.
Great.
One.
Well, here we're back, huh? Yeah, we're back here. We had a little technical difficulty. I'm not sure how this is going to work out in the overall scheme of things, but we'll make it work out, won't we, Dan?
Yes, sir.
So, Stu, we're about right out of time right now. So we done finished talk. We were talking about our boy, our man Henry Scott. I can't use that.
No.
And Henry was a great guy. I love that guy.
Oh no, great personality and
Yeah.
joking and all that. But like I said, I spent the ~73 season with him with the Longhorns, and again, he just wouldn't. He wasn't. He didn't have the 100%, 120% try hard, and it shortened his career.
Let's talk about you again, and we got so much. This could be a 2.5 hour session, but I want to get a little bit into your charity work. You giving back. You grew up in South Florida, and you feel good about giving back. Tell some of the things that you're super proud of.
Well, like I said, I feel anytime you can help out whoever, I mean, that's kind of what God wants you to do. And you know, I grew up Jewish. I converted to Christianity in 1975, so I'm a Advent follower of Jesus, and that's what it's all about. I mean, you know, we used to go to the VA. Well, for years, we would take players down, cheerleaders down to the Veterans Hospital. I mean, these guys are, you know, guys that obviously put their asses on the line for our freedom. And anytime I can get involved in any kind of a police or fire deal where an officer or fireman went down, but anything. I mean, obviously with kids, we actually hosted 2 or 3 years. We hosted an event, a fundraiser for the St. Jude Foundation. As you know, that's, you know, kids go there for free, and we would have it at our facility, and we would raise plenty of money for that. Obviously, if you can help a kid, we used to do a lot of work with Make-A-Wish, which was probably some of the sadder things, because then you'd find out 6 months later that the child that was there died, but anything or anybody. And again, Jason Taylor, he gives back every day with his foundation, O.J. McDuffie. Twan Russell has a reading group where they work with kids to show them how to read. And again, the alumni under Nat Moore and his associate Erica Simmons. I mean, they're out in the community, and again, I enjoy doing that, and you know, I'm blessed that I'm able to. And like I said, look, Stuart Weinstein showing up for the ABC charity, who cares? But Stuart Weinstein with the Dolphins, that has some credibility.
Well, okay, I got to wrap this up, and let's see, wrap it up with my mic here. But you talk about you didn't win a national championship in softball. Okay. You didn't win a Super Bowl in that football. But Stu, I think you won the Super Bowl of charity work.
Well, that's great. And if I'm noted for that when I'm gone, that's great.
And look, man, I never forgot you, buddy, and it's really been great hooking back up with you, meeting your lovely wife, Renee.
Well, we need to stay in touch. I mean,
let's
not let 40 years go by.
No, man, that's for sure.
And I apologize. As I told you, I saw you that time when I was with Matt Godfrey, but we were playing, and I didn't want to bother you, but
I heard you tell the story, Harold. Said, I hit him out of the park, man. I didn't know he could hit it that far.
Oh man, he hit one that it may still be going.
I love it, but I got to tell you a story about Fleetwood because he just told me this the other day. We're going to end on this softball world here, and I don't remember it because I thought that Rod Luce did it, but this is what Fleetwood told me, and then the way he told me, and I might believe it, and you might remember this, but we're in Titusville, where that railroad track went behind the field. Okay.
That was against my team.
And when
he hit it over the train?
No, this is what he said. He said he called timeout because the train was coming.
Okay.
He called timeout so the train was coming because he wanted to hit the longest ball ever. He wanted to hit it into the railroad car so it would go all the way to Miami.
Well, that was against us.
Was it against you?
That was against yours at Fort Lauderdale, yeah.
I thought it was Rod Luce that hit it, and I said that's the longest ball ever hit because it's gone to Miami.
No,
but it was against you.
It was. We had a pitcher that was he's not doing well health wise. They called him Tank. His name was Mike Julie.
Tank, I remember Tank.
And he would put on a show. He would talk to the other team. I mean, he was really, really fun to watch play.
Oh yes, I remember Tank, man.
And when Fleetwood called time, Tank started complaining to the umpire. We didn't know what Fleetwood was doing. and so when Fleetwood got back in the batter's box, Tank tried to quick pitch him, and the ball ended up on top of the railroad car.
Yeah.
Now, let me say this. Luce might have hit one there too. He could bomb them too.
Yeah. Well, my memory gets a little fuzzy, but I do remember people complaining about him doing that. So
But Fleetwood, one last Fleetwood story, and then we'll stop.
Okay.
We're up in Augusta, Georgia, and we're playing in a tournament up there, and pretty well attended, and we're playing in a baseball park before we move to the regular fields, and Ray gets up, and he asked the catcher, he said, has anybody hit any out of here? And the guy goes, you crazy? It's a baseball field. It's like 300 and something feet. The race will all be hitting one out before the day's over. Sure enough, second or third time up.
He did it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's an amazing young man. Well, Marty, again, thanks, and thanks to your wife Renee for coming up. All the best
Glad
for
to do
you.
it.
Stay healthy, buddy.
You guys both be healthy as well.
Dan, take us out,
Thank
buddy.
you very much, fellas. Let's go.
That's great.
All right, off to see Renee's.
Let's get a picture.
Brother?
Renee, you're gonna have to take a picture with Marty and us and that one out. So.
Dance, you learn as you go. Sometimes you lead, sometimes you follow. Don't worry about what you don't know. Life's a dance, you learn as you go. The longer I live, the more I believe you do have to give if you want to receive. There's a time to listen, a time to talk, and you might have to crawl even after you walk. Had your things blow up in my face, sing the long shot, win the race. Been knocked down by the slamming door, picked myself up and came back for more. Life's a dance, you learn as you go. Sometimes you lead, sometimes you follow. Don't worry about what you don't know. Life's a dance,